Usually when we talk about a set of laws or rules in a society, there's this expectation of permanence.
Right, like something carved in stone.
Exactly, like carving it into a literal stone. You write it down, you put it on a wall, and everyone in the room agrees, that is the rule.
Yeah, it's visible.
It's visible, it's solid, and honestly, it's comforting. But then you step into the world of George Orwell, and suddenly that stone is basically made of clay.
Oh, absolutely. It's fluid.
Right. We're looking at a landscape where reality itself is liquid. You turn your back for a single second, and the rule on the wall has an extra word added to it.
Just subtly tweaked.
Yeah, and the ink looks exactly the same. The people in charge swear it's always been there, and suddenly you find yourself doubting your own memory.
It is the absolute definition of psychological and political quicksand. I mean, when the foundational truth that a society builds itself upon can be altered retroactively.
Whenever the leaders feel like it.
Right, exactly. When that happens, the individual loses the ability to even conceptualize their own exploitation. They can't even see the trap anymore.
And that is the core of our deep dive today. So for everyone listening, if you've ever felt, overwhelmed by how quickly a noble idea can be twisted by those in charge, today's deep dive is going to show you exactly how that playbook is written.
It really is a masterclass.
We are looking at the mechanics of power, and we're drawing from three massive sources today. We've got the introductory biography from the complete novels of George Orwell, the unabridged text of his political allegory Animal Farm, and the opening chapters of his searing colonial novel, Burmese Days.
Some really heavy hitters.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But we aren't here to just recap these stories, like a book report. We're going to deconstruct how absolute power corrupts, how systems of oppression are meticulously built from the ground up, and really how the manipulation of language and memory is the ultimate weapon of control.
It's a journey, really.
We're journeying from this brilliantly disguised allegory of farm animals right into the sweltering, oppressive reality of colonial Burma, just to see these exact same systems operating in plain sight.
And I think it's crucial to start by saying that the architecture of these stories is completely inseparable from the architect himself.
George Orwell.
Right. You cannot decouple George Orwell's lived experiences from the warnings he left behind for us. I mean, to understand the psychological depth of his fiction, we have to look at how deeply embedded he was in the machinery of empire.
Yeah, let's get into his background, because it's wild.
It is. So he was born Eric Arthur Blair in 1903 in India. His father was a civil servant in the British Empire. So from his very first breath, his reality was structured by imperialism.
He was born into the system.
Exactly. Then the family returns to England, and he gets educated at Eton, which is the absolute pinnacle of the British elite educational system.
I mean, that is the literal factory that produces the prime ministers, the viceroys.
The people drawing the maps.
Yes. The people who drew the borders of the world map. So he is entirely on track to become a master of the universe. He's got the pedigree, the education, the societal expectation. Everything is lined up.
Which is exactly what makes his choice in 1922 so fascinating. Because instead of going on to university, like everyone expects him to, he goes to Burma and joins the Indian Imperial Police.
Which is a massive pivot.
Huge.
Yeah.
For 5 years, he serves as an enforcer for the British Empire. And this is the crucible that directly inspired Burmese Days. I mean, he wasn't a policymaker sitting in a plush office in London.
Right. He was on the ground.
He was the physical arm of the law in a colonial state. He was out there enforcing a strict hierarchy of racial and economic dominance.
And that has to leave a profound psychological mark on a person. To be the one literally holding the baton, demanding subjugation from the local population.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's one thing to read about oppression in an Eton library, right? It's a completely different thing to be the physical agent of it in the sweltering heat. And we see his breaking point hit in 1927.
Yeah.
The resignation.
Right. He's on leave in England, and he makes this radical pivot. He just resigns. He simply refuses to go back to Burma.
And he doesn't just resign and transition into like a comfortable desk job in London either. The biographical material details how he takes this deliberate, almost punishing plunge into absolute poverty.
It's so extreme.
It really is. He goes to Paris and London, and he's working as a dishwasher, a kitchen porter. He's living in these incredibly mean rooms, tramping around, picking hops with migrant workers.
But wait, I have to challenge the motivation there a little bit. I mean, is that just pure middle-class guilt? Like a guy from Eton feeling bad about being a colonial cop, so he goes slumming it to punish himself?
Well, guilt is certainly a component, sure. But interpreting it solely as penance kind of misses his broader intellectual project.
Okay, how so?
It was a rigorous, almost empirical sociological investigation. Think about it. Having served as the top-down enforcer of the hierarchy in Burma, he realized he needed to understand the invisible people who actually keep society running from the absolute bottom. Oh, I see. He needed the full picture.
Exactly. He needed to know what the world looked like from the perspective of the subjugated, the destitute, the people who possess literally zero institutional power. He was gathering the data that would inform his entire understanding of class and exploitation.
And that empirical data collection leads him straight into the Spanish Civil War in 1936.
Right.
He goes to Spain to fight for the Republicans against the fascist uprising. He's an actual militiaman in the trenches, and he literally takes a sniper bullet to the throat.
Yeah, barely survives.
But the physical wound isn't even the most devastating thing he takes away from Spain, is it? The source material highlights this massive systemic political betrayal.
That betrayal is the key to everything he wrote later. So the situation in Spain was this incredibly complex coalition of leftist factions. You had anarchists, syndicalists, Trotskyites, and Soviet-backed communists all supposedly fighting the fascists together.
A very fragile alliance.
Extremely fragile. Now, Orwell was attached to the POUM, which was a Marxist militia, and what he witnessed there was horrifying. He watched the Soviet-backed communists methodically turning on their own allies.
Just completely stabbing them in the back.
Yes. They actually prioritized purging the other leftist groups over fighting the fascists. They engaged in massive smear campaigns, arrests, and the executions of their supposed comrades.
Okay, I need to pause on that term for a second, Trotskyites, because it gets thrown around a lot in history, and I know it plays a massive role in the blueprint of Animal Farm. What does that actually mean in the context of this specific betrayal?
It's a great question. So in the simplest terms, it refers to the followers of Leon Trotsky. Trotsky advocated for a global, permanent revolution of the working class.
Right.
This was in direct opposition to Joseph Stalin's doctrine, which was all about consolidating socialism within one country. And practically speaking, that just meant centralizing all absolute power in Moscow.
Under Stalin.
Under Stalin. So in Spain, the Stalinists used the word Trotskyite as this blanket slur for literally any Marxist or leftist who didn't take direct orders from the Soviet Union.
Ah, so it was just a label to mark an enemy.
Exactly. By labeling Orwell's group, the POUM, as Trotskyites and secret fascist collaborators, which was a total lie, the Stalinists justified liquidating them.
Wow.
Orwell saw firsthand how a genuine revolution could be hijacked by a cynical elite, an elite that uses the rhetoric of liberation to build a new, even more ruthless dictatorship.
That creates a really fascinating paradox if you think about it. You have a man who voluntarily served as a literal imperial police officer, the ultimate tool of the state, who then takes a bullet fighting fascism, only to be hunted by the communists he thought he was allied with.
It's a dizzying trajectory.
It is, but participating in the system as both the oppressor and the oppressed gave him the complete blueprint to dismantle it.
And he stated his motive for writing very explicitly. He wasn't interested in producing, art for art's sake. He wrote that his motive was a desire to see things as they are, to find out true facts and store them up for the use of posterity.
To lay it all bare.
Right. He wanted to expose lies and draw attention to facts. And the betrayal he witnessed in Spain became the direct thematic and structural backbone of Animal Farm.
Well, let's dive into that structure.
Yeah.
Because Animal Farm starts with this incredibly pure, almost intoxicating spark of rebellion. We're at Manor Farm. The owner, Mr. Jones, is a drunk, a terrible manager, and the animals are really suffering.
Conditions are horrific.
And word goes around that old major, who is this prize boar, had a dream, and he wants to share it. When they all gather in the barn, Major's speech isn't just an airing of grievances. It is a meticulously crafted piece of political rhetoric.
It really operates as the foundational text of their entire worldview. It's essentially their communist manifesto. Major forces them to confront the brutal reality of their existence, stripping away any illusions they might have.
He doesn't sugarcoat it.
Not at all. He says their lives are miserable, laborious, and short. He points out that they are given just enough food to keep breathing, worked to the last atom of their strength, and then the moment they aren't useful, they are slaughtered.
But the genius of the speech is how he structures the solution.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
he creates a binary. He asks the animals if this misery is just the natural order of things. Like, is the land just too poor to support them? And he immediately rejects that. He says the soil is fertile, the climate is good.
The farm can support them all.
Right. The singular problem is that the produce of their labor is stolen. He distills the entirety of their complex suffering into a single unifying enemy, man. He says, man is the only creature that consumes without producing.
It's such a powerful line.
It really is. He doesn't give milk. He doesn't lay eggs. He's too weak to pull the plow. Yet he is Lord of all the animals.
And by creating that absolute binary, man is evil, animals are good, he provides a cohesive target for their rage. He points to the cows and asks where their milk has gone, down the throats of their enemies.
Yeah. He points to Boxer, the massive cart horse, and tells him the very day his muscles lose their power, Jones will sell him to the knacker to be boiled down for the foxhounds. Major prophesies a rebellion, a vague future event where justice will finally be done.
And then he locks it all in with a song.
Beasts of England.
Yes. It's a stirring, infectious anthem that paints a picture of a golden future time, rings vanishing from their noses, cruel whips cracking no more. The animals sing it 5 times in succession, going absolutely wild. And that isn't just a musical interlude, it's a psychological mechanism.
Absolutely. Anthems bypass the critical faculties of the intellect and tap directly into raw emotion. They bind a disparate group of individuals into a single unified organism.
They feel like one unit.
Right. Now, Old Major dies peacefully a few nights later, having provided the theoretical framework, but he never actually has to face the messy, chaotic reality of executing the revolution, which is so often the case with these ideological founders. But the rebellion itself happens completely by accident. It isn't this planned military coup. Jones goes on a massive drinking bender, his farmhands forget to feed the animals for a whole day, and the animals simply snap.
They're starving.
Literally starving. A cow breaks in the door of the store shed. Jones and his men come out with whips to punish them, and the animals just fling themselves at their tormentors. They butt and kick the humans right off the property. It's a visceral uprising born of physical abuse.
And the immediate aftermath of that uprising represents the pure phase of the revolution. The animals race around the boundaries to ensure no humans are hiding, and then they engage in this profound symbolic act, the destruction of the instruments of their oppression.
Getting rid of the tools.
Yeah, they fling the dog chains, the nose bags, the cruel castrating knives down the well. They burn the whips in a fire.
It's reclaiming their bodily autonomy. They aren't just taking over a piece of real estate, they're taking back ownership of their own flesh. And for a brief moment, it actually works.
It's a utopia.
They harvest the hay themselves, and it's the biggest harvest the farm has ever seen. There's no waste, no stealing. Every mouthful of food is a positive pleasure because it is theirs. They distill Major's teachings into the philosophy of animalism, which is summarized by the 7 commandments painted on the barn wall.
With the core tenet being, of course, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. But the seeds of the revolution's failure are planted on the very first day. We need to look really closely at who assumes control.
Right, because someone has to step up.
And it's the pigs, Snowball and Napoleon. And they reveal that they have secretly taught themselves to read and write from an old spelling book they found.
And that is the exact moment the egalitarian dream dies, isn't it? Before the ink on the commandments is even dry, a knowledge hierarchy is established.
Instantly.
During that miraculous first harvest, the pigs don't actually do any physical labor. The text notes they directed and supervised the others. With their superior knowledge, it was deemed natural that they assume leadership.
And that natural assumption of authority immediately leads to the first material corruption. So the cows are milked, producing 5 buckets of frothing milk. The animals ask what will happen to it.
A very fair question.
Very fair. Napoleon stands in front of the buckets and tells them not to worry about the milk, that it will be attended to. And when they return from the fields, the milk has mysteriously vanished into the pig's mash.
Just gone.
Gone. And soon after, the windfall apples are ordered to be brought to the harness room exclusively for the pigs.
This is the first real stress test of the new society.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how does an elite justify taking the best resources for themselves when the entire foundational philosophy is absolute equality?
It's a tricky PR problem.
Right, and they don't use force. They don't send the dogs out yet. They send squealers. Squealer is this small, fat pig who can supposedly turn black into white. He is the propaganda minister.
And Squealer's argument is the linguistic blueprint for authoritarian justification. He doesn't go out there and say, we are in charge, so we get the good food. That would shatter the illusion of equality completely and invite a second rebellion.
They just kick the pigs out.
Exactly. Instead, he claims that the pigs actually dislike milk and apples.
Oh, the sacrifice.
Right. He cites phantom science, claiming these items contain substances that are absolutely necessary to the well-being of a pig.
I look at this and I immediately see the exact same psychological trick used in modern corporate environments.
Oh, how so?
It's the equivalent of startup executives telling the floor workers, look, we hate going on these luxury retreats and taking massive bonuses. It's exhausting. But we are the brain workers. If we don't keep our minds sharp, the company goes under and you all lose your jobs. We are taking this money as a sacrifice for you.
Wow, yes, that is the exact same dynamic.
Squealer elevates the pig's management to a sacred duty, framing their privilege as a burden.
And he seals the argument with the ultimate rhetorical weapon, fear. He asks the crowd, do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back.
The ultimate boogeyman.
Exactly. That is a false dilemma. It's a logical fallacy presenting only two options. Either the pigs get the apples or the brutal dictator returns. The animals are absolutely terrified of Jones returning, so they accept the logic without further dispute.
They just swallow it.
The hierarchy is cemented through gaslighting and fear, completely bypassing the need for physical violence at this early stage.
But a regime cannot survive on linguistic tricks alone forever, especially as the euphoria of the rebellion starts to fade.
Yeah.
And we start seeing the power struggle between Snowball and Napoleon.
Two very different types of leaders.
Very. Snowball is the visionary. He forms committees, the Egg Production Committee, the Clean Tails League. He reads books on mechanics and draws up these incredibly complex plans for a windmill that will generate electricity, promising everyone a 3-day work week.
Snowball represents the intellectual, idealistic wing of a revolution. He genuinely wants to improve the material conditions of the farm through innovation.
And Napoleon.
Napoleon represents the paranoid, pragmatic accumulation of hard power. He opposes the windmill entirely. And he doesn't debate Snowball on the engineering merits or the economics. He simply walks into the shed, looks at the plans on the floor, and urinates all over them.
Which is just the ultimate expression of contempt for democratic debate. Napoleon is operating entirely behind the scenes. Remember those 9 puppies born earlier in the year?
Ah, yes.
The puppies, Napoleon took them away from their mothers, claiming he would handle their education in a secluded loft. Everyone just sort of forgot about them until the day the windmill is put to a vote. Snowball gives this brilliant, impassioned speech. The crowd is totally with him. He is clearly going to win the vote.
And then Napoleon plays his hand.
He just stands up and lets out a high-pitched whimper.
And that whimper is the death knell of the intellectual phase of the revolution. 9 enormous, fiercely aggressive dogs wearing brass-studded collars bound into the barn.
The puppies are all grown up.
Right. And they charge straight for Snowball. He barely escapes with his life, sprinting across the pasture and slipping through a hole in the hedge. He is permanently exiled.
But I don't buy that the animals just sit there and let this happen. I mean, they outnumber the dogs 10-1. They literally just overthrew human beings with guns a year ago.
It's true.
Why does the appearance of 9 dogs completely paralyze a population of seasoned revolutionaries? At some point, isn't there failure to rush the dogs a choice?
Well, it is a choice, but it's a choice born of profound shock and the sudden reintroduction of organized terror. Think about it. When they fought Jones, they had the element of surprise, they had the unifying ideology of major speech, and they had the sheer desperation of starvation.
They had nothing to lose.
Exactly. But when the dogs appear, the violence is coming from within their own ranks. The psychological whiplash is paralyzing. Furthermore, Orwell notes a really chilling detail. The dogs keep close to Napoleon, wagging their tails in the exact same manner the other dogs used to do to Mr. Jones.
Oh, wow. The symbolism there.
The oppressor's face has changed, but the apparatus of terror is intimately familiar. The animals are frozen by the sudden realization that the old world never actually left. It just put on a different mask.
And Napoleon doesn't waste a second. He immediately mounts the platform and abolishes the Sunday debates.
Yeah.
All decisions will now be made by a special committee of pigs presided over by himself.
Total autocracy.
And 4 young porkers actually do squeal in disapproval and stand up to protest. But the dogs let out these deep, menacing growls and the pigs sit right back down. Physical terror establishes the new boundary of acceptable speech.
And then Squealer's backup singers chime in.
The sheep. They erupt into 15 minutes of bleating, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, just completely drowning out any possibility of further discussion.
This is exactly how the dual pillars of totalitarianism function in tandem. You have the monopoly on violence, the dogs to instantly crush any act of dissent, but violence is energetically expensive and it's unstable.
You can't rely on it 24/7.
Right. To maintain long-term control, you must pair it with the destruction of objective reality. You have to make the population doubt their own memories, and that's when Squealer is dispatched to rewrite the history of the rebellion.
Which she does flawlessly. Someone points out that Snowball fought bravely at the Battle of the Cowshed. Squealer immediately counters that bravery is not enough. Loyalty and obedience are more important. He begins planting the seed that Snowball's role was exaggerated.
The rewriting begins.
And when Napoleon suddenly announces they're going to build the windmill after all, Squealer explains that Napoleon actually never opposed it. He claims it was Napoleon's idea all along, and Snowball stole the plans.
Squealer calls Napoleon's previous opposition tactics. And the animals don't even know what the word means, but Squealer speaks so persuasively, and the dogs flanking him growl so threateningly that they just accept it.
It's easier to agree.
The tragedy here is the systematic destruction of their epistemology, their methodology for determining what is actually true. Because they cannot read, their only archive is their memory. And Squealer constantly assaults that archive.
I think about how this applies today. It's like algorithmic shadow banning or the silent editing of digital articles.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
The rules of what you can say or what supposedly happened yesterday, they just change invisibly overnight. You look for the post and it's gone. The terms of service are updated retroactively. Squealer asks him, "Are you certain that this is not something that you have dreamed, comrades? Is it written down anywhere?"
Which is so cruel because he knows they can't read.
Exactly. When you are working 60 hours a week, living on reduced rations and terrified of the secret police, the cognitive load of holding on to your own truth is just exhausting. It is psychologically easier to surrender to the state's narrative than to hold on to a reality that might get your throat torn out.
And we see this exact mechanism applied to the foundational laws themselves. So the pigs move into the farmhouse and start sleeping in beds. Clover the horse distinctly remembers a commandment against this. She asks Muriel the goat to read the fourth commandment.
And it's changed.
It now reads, "No animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets." Clover doesn't remember the with sheets part, but it's written right there on the wall.
And Squealer just happens to be passing by, right? He provides the definitive spin. He argues that a bed is merely a place to sleep. Even a pile of straw is technically a bed. The rule, he claims, was strictly against the human invention of sheets.
Such a sleight of hand.
The alteration of text is insidious because it leverages the animals' illiteracy against them. Later on, when the pigs discover whiskey, no animal shall drink alcohol, mysteriously gains the suffix to excess.
Right.
And, most chillingly, no animal shall kill any other animal becomes without cause.
If the state controls the past, the written record, it controls the future. If it controls the language, it controls what is conceptually possible to think. By subtly altering the definitions, the pigs ensure that their corruption is always technically legal within the framework of animalism.
But the psychological breaking point goes far, far beyond just altering text. When the windmill is destroyed in a storm, Napoleon doesn't admit to an engineering failure.
Never.
He immediately blames Snowball, claiming the exiled pig crept in at night and ruined a year's work.
Yeah.
Snowball transforms into this omnipresent, invisible boogeyman. Every broken window, every lost key is blamed on him. And this leads to the most horrifying sequence in the book, the show trials.
It's a brutal scene. Napoleon orders the animals to assemble. The dogs drag 4 pigs forward. These pigs are forced to confess to being secretly in touch with Snowball, to collaborating with him to destroy the windmill.
Even though everyone knows it was the wind?
Right. And the moment their confessions are finished, the dogs tear their throats out. And the bloodshed cascades. Hens confess to dreaming that Snowball incited them to disobey. A goose confesses to hiding corn. A sheep confesses to urinating in the drinking pool.
It's maddening.
They are all slaughtered until a pile of corpses sits at Napoleon's feet and the air is heavy with the smell of blood.
This is the part that I demand an explanation for this. I refuse to believe this is just mass hysteria. Why does a goose confess to hiding corn, knowing for an absolute, verifiable fact that the concession will result in instant death? What is the specific mechanism that breaks a psyche so thoroughly that it volunteers for execution?
It's a really disturbing phenomenon, but it's one observed in real historical purges, particularly the Stalinist show trials that Orwell was directly mirroring here.
Okay, break that down for me.
In a fully realized totalitarian system, the concepts of objective guilt and innocence evaporate completely. The state has decreed that Snowball is the root of all failures and discontent. If an animal feels any vague sense of dissatisfaction or if they had a bad dream, the overwhelming, suffocating pressure of the state's narrative convinces them that they must be infected by Snowball.
They internalize the guilt.
Exactly. The individual ego is systematically crushed. Confessing to the state's fabricated narrative becomes a bizarre form of surrender. It's the only way to resolve the agonizing cognitive dissonance, even if the resolution is death.
Wow.
It is the ultimate triumph of the collective lie over individual sanity.
Which makes the fate of those who survive, the ones who truly believe in the system, almost harder to stomach. We have to talk about Boxer, the massive cart horse.
Boxer breaks your heart.
He really does. He isn't a rebel. He is the most faithful servant of the regime. He represents the loyal, hardworking proletariat whose sheer physical labor builds the utopian dream.
And Boxer's tragedy is rooted in his epistemic limitations. He possesses immense physical strength, but lacks the intellectual tools to parse Squealer's linguistic manipulations. He tries to learn the alphabet, but he can only learn the first 4 letters. A, B, C, D.
That's as far as he gets.
In the absence of critical analysis, he relies on 2 maxims. I will work harder, and Napoleon is always right.
No matter how bad things get, no matter how much the food rations are reduced while the pigs grow fat, Boxer's response is to wake up an hour earlier to drag more stone for the rebuilding of the windmill.
He literally carries the farm on his back.
Clover warns him that his lungs won't last forever, but he is fixated on reaching his retirement age. The promise of a pension, a pasture set aside for superannuated animals, is the foundational social contract of animalism.
It's the one thing keeping them going.
And the climax of his life is the purest distillation of systemic betrayal. He pushes himself way too far and collapses while dragging a massive boulder. His lung is injured, he can't get up. He genuinely believes he is finally going to retire.
And Squealer shows up.
Right. Squealer announces that, out of the goodness of his heart, Napoleon is making arrangements to send Boxer to a human hospital in Willingdon to get the best care.
And the animals are uneasy about turning their comrade over to humans, but they trust the system. So a closed van arrives, the animals are waving goodbye to Boxer, and then Benjamin, the cynical old donkey who never speaks up, who has watched all this corruption unfold with detached apathy, suddenly snaps.
He finally acts.
He gallops up, braying frantically, and for the first time in the entire novel, he reads the text on the side of the van out loud.
Benjamin shouts, "Fools! Do you not see what is written on the side of that van? Alfred Simmons, horse slaughterer, and glue boiler, they are taking Boxer to the knackers."
It's chilling.
The animals scream for Boxer to get out. Boxer's face appears at the small window at the back, and you can see the realization dawn on him. We hear the tremendous drumming of his hooves inside the van as he tries to kick his way out.
But the tragedy is that he spent all his strength building the windmill for the pigs. He gave them everything. He has nothing left to save himself.
The drumming fades. The van drives away. The regime literally sold their most devoted, exhausted worker to be boiled down into glue.
And it gets worse.
A few days later, a wooden crate is delivered to the farmhouse. The pigs are heard singing and drinking late into the night. They bought a case of whiskey with the blood money from Boxer's corpse.
It is the absolute apex of capitalist exploitation executed by the architects of a supposed communist utopia. Boxer is utilized until his physical utility drops to 0, and then his very flesh is consumed by the ruling class.
Consumed, literally.
And the psychological control is so complete that Squealer is actually able to cover it up. He claims the van was purchased by the veterinary surgeon who just hadn't yet painted out the old name.
And he adds that little emotional detail, too.
Right. He describes Boxer dying peacefully in a hospital bed, whispering Napoleon is always right with his last breath.
And the animals believe it. Or rather, they choose to believe it, because the cognitive dissonance of acknowledging that their leader sold their hero to a slaughterhouse, that would require another rebellion. And they are simply too exhausted, too starved, and too broken to fight.
It's easier to accept the lie.
They accept the lie because the truth is unsurvivable.
And this profound exhaustion leads directly to the chilling conclusion of the allegory. Years pass. The rebellion is a distant, hazy memory. The farm is wealthier, but the wealth is concentrated entirely within the bureaucratic class, the pigs and the dogs.
The workers are still starving.
The ultimate betrayal of Major's vision manifests physically. The pigs learn to walk on their hind legs. They emerge from the farmhouse carrying whips in their trotters.
The sheep, who previously drowned out debate with 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, have been secretly retrained.
Right.
They now bleat 4 legs good, 2 legs better.
The final nail in the coffin.
Clover asks Benjamin to read the barn wall one last time. The original 7 commandments have been erased. In their place is a single paradoxical maxim. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
The linguistic manipulation reaches its terminal point. The paradox is institutionalized as law. And the final scene masterfully illustrates the complete erasure of ideological difference.
Set the scene for us.
The pigs invite the neighboring human farmers, led by Mr. Pilkington, for a tour and a card game in the farmhouse. The other animals peer through the window from the outside, watching this dinner party.
Pilkington makes a toast that just cuts through all the allegorical layers. He congratulates the pigs on their discipline and their low rations for the workers. He says, if you have your lower animals to contend with, we have our lower classes.
The mask slips completely.
It is the devastating realization that the mechanics of oppression are identical, regardless of whether the system calls itself capitalist, communist, or animalist.
Napoleon announces that the farm's name is changing back to the Manor Farm, and then a fight breaks out at the card table because Napoleon and Pilkington both play an ace of spades simultaneously.
They're both cheating.
They are exactly the same. The animals looking through the window look from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again, but already it is impossible to say which is which.
It's the political horseshoe theory rendered in flesh. The extreme revolutionaries have traveled so far into fanaticism and power accumulation that they are sitting in the exact same chairs, wielding the exact same whips as the dictators they overthrew.
And the thing is, and this is crucial, this wasn't merely a theoretical exercise for Orwell. He didn't just imagine these dynamics in a farmhouse. He administered them in real life.
Right, which seamlessly connects us to the second half of our deep dive. The sweltering, sticky, oppressive reality of British colonial rule in Burmese days.
Here, we move from allegory directly into autobiographical observation.
We are transported to Kyauktada, a small, blistering town in Upper Burma. The dust is suffocating, the heat is relentless, and the town is governed by a microscopic handful of Europeans ruling over thousands of locals. But Orwell doesn't start by introducing us to the British administrators, does he?
No, he doesn't. He starts with Yupo Kin.
The subdivisional magistrate.
Exactly. Yupo Kin is a masterclass in bureaucratic parasitism. He is a local Burmese man, immensely fat, constantly chewing betel nut, who has learned exactly how to leverage the British imperial system for his own massive enrichment.
He's playing the game perfectly.
He completely dismantles the notion that colonial oppression is just a simple top-down dynamic of white rulers oppressing brown subjects. The system actively requires and rewards ruthless locals who are willing to exploit their own people under the protective umbrella of British law.
His methodology is brilliantly corrupt. If he is presiding over a legal case, he doesn't just sell the verdict to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
That would risk exposure, right?
Sure, risky.
Instead, he takes bribes from both sides of the dispute and then delivers a verdict based strictly on the legal merits of the case. He gets rich, and the British administrators view him as an impeccably impartial magistrate.
It's evil genius.
And he also uses gangs of dacoits, basically bandits, to extort local villages. If the village pays Yupo Kin his private tax, the bandits miraculously leave them alone.
Yupo Kin understands the psychology of his colonial masters better than they understand themselves. He destroys his local rivals using anonymous letters and false witnesses, specifically weaponizing the inherent racism of the British.
How does he do that?
He openly tells his clerk that no European cares about actual proof. If a man has a black face, the mere whisper of suspicion is considered proof enough for the British. He uses their prejudice as a tool to eliminate his enemies.
And the most incredible part of this guy is his moral accounting. He is fully aware that he is a corrupt, destructive force. But his plan is to spend his final years doing good works, which in his mind strictly translates to building pagodas.
To buy his way out of hell.
To pile up enough karmic merit to outweigh a lifetime of extortion, ensuring he isn't reincarnated as a rat or a frog. It's a purely transactional view of spirituality that perfectly mirrors the transactional, extractive nature of the colonial enterprise itself.
Exactly. Now, while Yupo Kin schemes in his private residence, the actual locus of power sits a few hundred yards away. The European Club. The club is the physical and spiritual citadel of British power. It is a dumpy, unimpressive wooden building, but it functions exactly like the farmhouse and animal farm.
It's the boundary.
It is the exclusive, heavily guarded boundary that separates the superior rulers from the ruled.
The cast of characters inside the club reviews the varied psychological dysfunctions of the ruling class. You have Mr. McGregor, the deputy commissioner. He's heavy, seeming kindly, kind of modeling himself on a facetious schoolmaster.
But underneath,
Right, underneath, he views the locals with a sort of paternalistic fondness, provided they remain entirely subservient. He secretly pines for the old days, when an official could just order a servant given 15 lashes for looking at him wrong.
you also have Westfield, the gloomy police superintendent who views the entire concept of a legal justice system as a hindrance. He constantly laments that the British Raj is collapsing because they are burdened with laws and evidence, rather than simply ruling by martial law.
They just want absolute authority.
And then you have Ellis.
Oh, Ellis. Ellis is a profoundly disturbing character. He's a manager for a timber firm. He's tiny, sharp-featured, and speaks with this constant, spiteful, wounding tone. His hatred for the local population isn't passive. It is an active, boiling rage.
It consumes him.
When McGregor posts a notice suggesting they might adhere to a new directive and admit one native official to the club, specifically, Dr. Veeraswamy Ellis completely loses his mind.
Ellis's reaction is a terrifying glimpse into the psychological rot required to sustain imperialism. He vandalizes the notice. He spews horrific racial slurs. He screams that they have to hang together and tell the locals, "We are the masters, and you beggars keep your place."
Just pure venom.
He views any hint of equality, any suggestion of shared humanity with an Oriental, as a perverse existential threat.
I have to ask about the root of that rage. Is Ellis just an inherently evil individual, or is his virulent racism a required psychological defense mechanism? If you are a middle manager extracting resources from a foreign country, backed by a military occupation, can you survive psychologically without convincing yourself that the people you're robbing are subhuman?
That's the crux of it. It is absolutely a defense mechanism, which of course in no way absolves him of the bigotry. Orwell is demonstrating that participating in a system of systemic subjugation requires cognitive distortion.
You have to lie to yourself.
If Ellis were to acknowledge the Burmese as his equal human peers, the crushing guilt of his role in their exploitation would shatter his psyche. To function as an agent of empire, men like Ellis must whip themselves into a frenzy of racial hatred. They must relentlessly assert their innate superiority because deep in their subconscious, they know the entire imperial project is a morally bankrupt theft.
That brings us to the silent observer in the club, the man who understands the theft but does absolutely nothing. Flory.
Flory is such a complex figure.
He's another timber merchant, and he carries a hideous dark blue birthmark stretching down his left cheek. He constantly maneuvers his body to keep the birthmark hidden from whoever he is talking to. It is the perfect physical manifestation of his inner deformity, his crippling moral cowardice.
Flory is the tragic center of the narrative. Unlike Ellis, Flory sees the truth of the colonial system with perfect clarity. He despises the British presence in Burma. He knows the rhetoric of civilizing the natives is a grotesque lie.
He stays.
Yet he is entirely complicit. He sits in the club, drinks his gin, listens to Ellis's racist vitriol, and remains completely silent. He is paralyzed by the fear of social ostracization.
He internalizes this agonizing torment. He knows the British official holds the Burman down while the British businessman goes through his pockets. But he only voices this critique in the absolute privacy of his friendship with Dr. Veeraswamy, and this creates one of the most brilliant, inverted, ideological mirrors in modern literature.
It really is brilliant. Dr. Veeraswamy is an Indian civil surgeon. He is a direct victim of the colonial system's racial hierarchy. He is barred from the club, yet he's the most passionate defender of the British Empire in the entire novel.
It's so backward. Flory, the white oppressor, sits in the doctor's house and calls the empire a theft monopoly, referring to it as the Pax Britannica that violently ruins native culture.
And Veeraswamy argues back.
Veeraswamy, the oppressed Indian doctor, vehemently disagrees. He insists the British are torchbearers upon the path of progress. He argues that the British brought law, modern medicine, roads, and protection from corrupt, predatory men like Yupo Keen.
Veeraswamy suffers from a profound institutional Stockholm syndrome. He idolizes his oppressors. His ultimate aspiration is to be elected to the European Club.
The very place that hates him.
Right. He desperately needs the perceived prestige of club membership to protect himself from Yupo Keen's blackmail schemes, falsely believing that association with the British gentleman will shield him. He believes in the nobility of the British character, completely blind to the fact that those same gentlemen are sitting in the club calling him vile names and vowing to keep him out.
I look at Flory's relationship with Veeraswamy, and it functions exactly like a pressure valve on an industrial boiler. Flory goes to the doctor's house, drinks his beer, and vents just enough seditious steam about how terrible the empire is.
Just to let it out.
Exactly. That private venting is the exact mechanism that prevents him from exploding in public. It provides the catharsis of rebellion without demanding any of the risk. By complaining to the doctor, Flory acquires the psychological endurance to go back to the club the next day and continue functioning as a silent, compliant cog in the imperial machine.
That is a crucial insight into how oppressive systems maintain stability. Private dissent doesn't threaten the system. It often sustains it by releasing the tension that might otherwise lead to public revolt.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Upokane is actively setting his trap. He knows Veeraswamy is an honest man who refuses to take bribes, which interferes with Upokane's extortion rackets. So Upokane begins sending anonymous defamatory letters to the Europeans, accusing Veeraswamy of disloyalty and sedition.
And he knows how the Europeans will react.
Upokane knows exactly what Ellis and McGregor will do. They won't investigate. The mere suspicion, combined with their inherent prejudice, will be enough to ruin the doctor.
It all comes back to the control of the narrative, the exact same principles Squealer used on the farm. Whether you are a pig altering commandments on a barn wall in a fictional England, or a corrupt magistrate weaponizing the racism of a colonial elite in 1920s Burma, the mechanics of power are identical.
They don't change.
They rely on the subtle manipulation of language, the strict control of physical space, whether it's the farmhouse or the European club, and, most importantly, the silent complicity of people like Flory, who clearly see the truth but refuse to speak up out of cowardice and a desire to maintain their comfortable position within the hierarchy.
Orwell's ultimate warning is that the architecture of tyranny isn't solely built with guns, dogs, and whips. Violence is merely the enforcement mechanism.
The enforcer, yeah.
The true foundation of tyranny is built with words. It is built by redefining what is good and bad, by isolating the population from objective truth, and by cultivating an environment where publicly agreeing with a known lie becomes the only accepted methodology for survival.
Which brings this entire deep dive directly into the present moment for anyone listening. We might not live on Manor Farm, and we aren't drinking warm gin in a colonial club in Calcutta. But the playbook hasn't changed.
It's not one bit.
When you see statistics deliberately manipulated at a corporate level to cover up a systemic failure, when you hear language actively twisted by politicians to justify the unjustifiable, or when an entire demographic is suddenly scapegoated for complex economic problems, you are seeing Squealer and Upokane executing their routines. You are watching the exact same software running on modern hardware.
The tools of subversion remain constant. The appeal to existential fear, the slow, methodical alteration of historical memory, the demand that personal loyalty to the leadership must supersede the evidence of your own eyes and ears. Orwell's work is not a historical artifact. It is an active, urgent warning that requires continuous, exhausting vigilance.
Which leaves us with a final, slightly uncomfortable thought to chew on. We spent this time breaking down how totalitarian control and imperial oppression rely on the gradual rewriting of rules, the adoption of confusing jargon, and the surrender of the individual ego.
Right.
Look at our own unexamined acceptance of modern corporate speak, the synergistic paradigms, the pivots, the right sizing of departments, or the heavily sanitized focus group narratives of modern politics. Is our willingness to accept language that obscures reality the first silent step in giving away our own power? If we lose the ability to speak plainly about what is happening right in front of us, do we inevitably lose the ability to think freely?
A society that cannot accurately articulate its own exploitation is a society that has lost the capacity to resist it.
Remember that blank sheet of paper, the stone rules melting into clay? When reality becomes liquid, the people who control the definitions control the world. Keep questioning the narrative, refuse to let the rules change without a fight, and never let them tell you the van is going to the hospital when you can read the words on the side. We'll see you next time.